Today we have even more instances of Islamophobia around the country, both attacks and acts of possible terrorism. The first is a man in New York who launched an attack after screaming about Islam and ISIS. So he goes into this eatery, and he'd been going there for a while apparently. It is staffed by some people who originated in India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and he apparently didn't like the look of him. So he started yelling about Islam, yelling about ISIS. According to an employee, the altercation came after he harassed other customers before turning on Mahood, one of the employees there, and saying, "Why don't you tell me your religion?" and calling him a Muslim motherfucker. He didn't tell you his religion. That's presumptive to say that he's a Muslim motherfucker. A brawl between employees and Murino ensued before he was ejected from the restaurant, only to return moments later where he picked up chairs and began smashing the glass dividers in the restaurant before leaving again. And so we've had a couple of cafes/restaurants in the past week or so that have been attacked by somebody screaming about Islam, screaming about Muslims. But that's not the only attack. There's perhaps an even scarier one, and that has to do with the Council on American Islamic Relations that had to evacuate one of their headquarters because of a suspicious envelope filled with white powder. It had a hate message in it. It was signed that an infidel had sent it. And so that was executive director there explaining that. One of the attorneys for CARE said that we receive hate messages daily because of our advocacy on behalf of the American Muslim community. By the way, this is literally minutes before we were gonna go live. There's a Coachella area mosque that has an act of arson that's being investigated right now. No injuries, but it was set on fire. That was very recently. And overall, largely, we've been talking about these stories now for weeks, about attacks, about the woman in a California park who went up to a group of Muslims who were praying and started yelling at them, threw coffee in their face. So overall, through December 8, so far this year, American mosques and Islamic centers have been the victims of vandalism, harassment, and anti-Muslim bigotry at least 63 times this year. That's the highest number since the Muslim civil rights group CARE began keeping track in 2009, and a threefold increase over last year. The previous high, just a little bit more history, the previous high was 53 incidents back in 2010 during the controversy over the Ground Zero Mosque, but many of those incidents just concerned biased zoning hearings for new mosques. This year's hostilities have a sharper edge, meaning that they're acts of arson, assault, potential attempted murder. We had the cab driver who, the guy went into his house, got a gun, and started shooting at him. These sorts of things. So this is scary, and perhaps a coincidence that it comes at a time when people like Donald Trump and Fox News are hyping up the threat of Muslims across the country.
Yeah, so it's of course not a coincidence that the more it's in the news, the more people do the hate crimes. They get passionate, they get worked up. So Ground Zero Mosque, so-called Ground Zero Mosque is in the news, people do anti-Muslim stuff. Now, to be fair, it's not just Trump that's in the news doing this, or even Fox News, but it's in the news because those are the terrorist attacks. So the Paris attacks that killed 130 people, then we get hit here in San Bernardino, 14 people killed, 21 injured. People are already pissed, and then Trump comes along and pours significant fuel on that fire. And the reason why the Trump part of it is so damaging is because it seems to legitimize what some of these hateful guys are thinking, and they go, "Oh yeah, he's saying it too, right?" Yeah. And look at that, and that guy's leading, presidential contender for the Republican Party. I mean, I don't know that they say that exact sentence, but they feel like it's okay, it's legitimate, because that guy on TV keeps saying it. So, and then all of a sudden you have these guys now that are brazenly say, "Hey, what's your religion? If you're Muslim, I'm going to kick your ass."
Yeah.
This is the problem with hate speech generally. The refrain in this country is it's a free country. I respect your right to say whatever you want, and I understand that. But hate speech is damaging for just this reason, that if you put enough out there, it catalyzes people who are on the edges. I understand this is not the average person doesn't, go out there and shoot up a mosque or take a chair and throw it through the window. Frankly, against the backdrop of all the shoot-em-ups, I'm kind of happy, for a good old-fashioned glass breaking. You know what I mean? It's just nobody was killed. But having said that, I think that's the real damaging part of this. And when Trump first started with the Mexicans and Latinos and building the wall, that was the beginning of the hate speech. And of course, it's been amped up now to to a level that's even more dangerous. But I feel that's what I really lament in this country now, is that there's sort of, political correct. I'm not going to be politically correct, so I'm going to put a lot of hate speech out that might catalyze a bunch of people to do things that we've seen you reference. You know?
So I grew up around a lot of racists, so I have I feel like I have an insight into the way they think. And the way they think is that Donald Trump isn't saying anything racist. He just has the guts to tell the truth, right? And they think that people like me and you and us, when we don't say horrible, hateful stuff like him and blame Mexicans or want to exclude all Muslims, they think it's because we're weak, even though they think we actually think those things and agree with those things, but we don't have the guts to say them.
Yeah.
And because we're afraid of what it would look like and that we're being anti-PC and the PC crowd would shun us and we don't want to be shunned. That's literally what they think. They think that what Donald Trump is doing is he has the balls to tell the truth and call a spade and nobody else has that kind of courage. Yeah. That's really what they see. That's because racists, just like, I was in an acting class one time and they taught me not to judge the character, even if you're playing a murderer, because murderers don't judge themselves as murderers. They think that anybody would do what I'm doing in this situation. Yeah. So they don't judge themselves negatively, just like racists don't. They think anybody who had the courage like I do would be saying the shit I do. Oh, Donald Trump has that courage. That's exactly what they're thinking, right? Yeah. So I just hope that gives you a little insight into what they're thinking. They don't think, hey, I'm a racist. They think I'm courageous enough to tell the truth and stand up to these motherfuckers. That's what they think.
Yeah, by the way, like the first story we gave you here, and by the way, we've done 3 stories a day almost every day this week of different attacks against Muslims. So these 3 isn't like, hey, we found 3 stories in the country. Yeah. No, there's just today.
These are the ones we chose out of the ones today.
Right, and so the first one of the guy attacking at the store in New York, right? So what kind of courage does it take to just pull a random guy who doesn't want to fight back? And the guy said, the Muslim kid says that he didn't want to fight back because he said, as a Muslim, I want to be polite. I don't want to fight anyone. Okay, that's his interpretation of Islam. God bless. I like that interpretation, right? But so how courageous is it to punch that guy in the face? Not that courageous. Yeah. Right? So, I mean, it's not like the guy's fighting back. There's nothing going on. It doesn't take courage to throw a punch like that. They think they're so tough. They think they're so manly and all this stuff. No, you're the one throwing the punch. There's nothing courageous about it.
There was the attack on one African American man at a Trump rally. We did an attack on the 2, I believe it was 2 Latino men in New York. And so now we have all of these attacks. I know that they've been going on for a long time. There's more of them now. But like we said, it's no coincidence that Trump is the most outspoken. There's others who are saying similar things. He could go on one of his big speeches and just say, ISIS is the biggest threat the universe has ever known. But how about we not terrorize these people? How about we not send fake anthrax if it turns out to be fakes? Let's say we don't actually recreate the crystal knocked in their businesses. He could say that. But we're at a point in 2015 in America where it would hurt his poll numbers to say don't commit acts of terrorism against Muslims. And the thing that's so crazy about this country is we're coming off of a week where Megyn Kelly and Bill O'Reilly were both saying there's no evidence of any Islamophobia or anti-Muslim bias in this country. Fuck all these stories. Who cares? It doesn't matter. If the thing with, if it had been a Christian business and a Muslim guy goes in and says, tell me a religion, you motherfucker Christian, they would never stop talking about it. Ever. I mean, we have every year a War on Christmas month on Fox with books written and specials because Starbucks doesn't put enough Christian verses on a coffee cup. They literally, I went to Starbucks, there's Christmas shit everywhere. Everywhere.
Yeah, and that's in July.
Imagine
the ramp up to Christmas. It's laughable, that whole thing.
It's amazing, but you can go into their cabs and you can shoot them. You can throw coffee in their face, yell about that they're driven by Satan.
You can,
and that's no evidence of anti-Muslim bias.
You can invade their country, kill hundreds of thousands of people, displace millions more on a lie, and still call them the violent, crazy ones. They're the violent, crazy ones.
Yeah.
Because you see how they fought back? Like fucking maniacs. That's how they fought back when we were bombing them. They're crazy. They all banded together against us like fucking maniacs.
Yeah. There are a lot of Muslims in the U.S. armed forces. Mm-hmm. You say, what kind of message does this send them right now? They're in Afghanistan. They're in Iraq. They're in foreign theaters of war, and so it's sort of that's where the shoe pinches. The other place the shoe pinches on this Trump speak. Hey Don, we got a lot of people who are Muslim. They're fighting for us over there. They're getting their boots dirty.
Yeah.
So it's
well, the
bizarre. To me.
parallels to what happened with the Japanese in our country are really striking, right? Because
He made them.
I mean,
For him to cite him is crazy.
it is. I mean, like we all understand. Ronald Reagan gave reparations to the Japanese because of what we did to them. Ronald Reagan, right? And Donald Trump's like, I think that was a good idea. We did that to them. We put them in there. It might not be a bad idea. I'm not Japanese, so who gives a fuck?